Andy Moeckel, thanks for doing this. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah,
I met you about a year ago, and you're one of the people I wanted to do this with. So I appreciate you being here.
I appreciate you having me on.
What is the meaning behind the flip flop guy?
That's a really good question. The meaning behind the flip flop guy. So it all started in 1958 with my grandfather. And he had seen Portuguese farmers in his job as a fish and game warden for California. And they'd put an entire lamb leg on a spit and crank it around and just cut off chunks of meat. My grandfather saw that and thought, oh my God, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. We have to try this with venison. So instead of putting it on a spit, he just put the leg straight over a grate, over charcoal. Started cooking it that way and would flash sear one side and then flip it over. Flash sear one side, flip it over, cut that cooked side in those little tiny sliver steaks, feed everybody, reapply the sauce and the salt and pepper, and then flop it over again. So flip flop the leg and just shave 1/4 inch thick slices of meat off the whole way. So that was kind of how it got the name flip flop. I took it into calling it the flip flop guy after I ran it by my family to see if we could create a business out of it. I asked both my parents for permission. Both my grandparents had been deceased for a number of years at that time. And my family was 100% on board. So me being one of the only people that was doing it or does it at the time, because it was just kind of a small backyard Marin County tradition, called it the flip flop guy.
So you put the meat down, the leg, it sears it, and then you cut a piece off and you flip it over, or you sear both sides.
No. So the way the flip flop works is we'll take the entire hind quarter of an animal, bones still in it, all the way down to the knee, and we'll use a rosemary mop, and we'll mop sauce on one side of the leg, salt and pepper it, and we'll put that face down over the charcoal to start. Well, that side is searing it. You're running about 1100-degree heat. You'll use your rosemary mop. You'll baste the top side, and you'll salt and pepper that in about a minute, only a minute cooking time because that high heat. You'll flip the whole leg over, and you'll cut off all the cooked meat over the entire surface of the leg. So once you do that, you have seared and rare meat coming off. Once you cut all the meat off, you have a whole raw leg that's uncooked. You reapply the sauce, salt and pepper it, and then flop it back over. So you'll flip-flop the leg the whole way down, repeating the process. And one of the beauties about it, because there's a lot of people that do it now, since I've introduced it to the hunting community abroad. One of the beautiful things about it is that every time that a new person is trying this out, every time they flip and flop that leg, they have a whole new leg to start with. So if they feel like they messed up on their first one, well, you've got like anywhere from 30 or 40 attempts to get it right and learn the whole time you're doing it.
Yeah, because I've tried searing steak a few times.
Yeah.
And oh man, I just wasted a $50 piece of meat.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you sear it, and so it's basically like seared and rare, and then that's the piece. When you put the what is it, a knife or
the knife.
The knife in there.
Yeah.
Do you know how far to go, or you?
I do, but one of the biggest things that I forget for myself as a teacher of the experience and trying to pass on our family tradition into other families is that every time I do it, I know exactly how I'm slicing, the depth that I'm slicing. So it's complete second nature to me. So when I'm looking at the leg and sizing up where I'm going to cut next, I'm looking where I have that perfect 1/4 inch thick depth to just slide the knife right under and start peeling off those slivers of meat and feeding everybody off the tip of the knife blade.
What is the secret behind the marinade that makes the flip flop so distinct?
75 years of family experience. I mean, I honestly, I don't have a perfect recipe for, I mean, I have a perfect recipe for the sauce, but I don't have a perfect recipe for how it all works together. Um, I think that the salt and pepper have a huge role to play in it. I think that the rosemary mop has a huge role to play in it. The Grassi family, when they do theirs, my grandfather taught their family, back in the 60s how to do it, but they use bay leaves. So that's their mop, is they're using entire branches of bay off of a bay tree instead of rosemary. We just use rosemary. So I feel like every single part of it plays a role in the overall perfection on how it comes out.
Have you stuck with it, or have you stuck with the family tradition, or have you branched out and tried I don't know what you would use?
I've done other things, and to me, honestly, none of it ever comes out as good as the way that we always did it. So I don't branch out much anymore. I started cooking legs. My dad passed the tradition to me. I want to say in 2007. And when I was new at doing it, and I wanted to try different things, and
Of course.
I wanted to innovate the way that we do it. I wanted to put my own spin on it. And I found that there's no better way to do it than the way that we'd been doing it for 70 years.
Do you have to adjust, if you're doing the flip-flop technique for venison or elk?
No.
It's all the same?
Every time I do it, no matter what the species is, and I would even take it a step further as to say that when you're cooking the wild game the way that I do it, you can't really taste much variation between species of animal, whether you're doing bighorn sheep, thin-horn sheep, caribou, elk, deer, moose, which I've cooked all over the United States and Canada. I haven't ever noticed a difference between any of the flavors of meat.
What is the toughest part of doing this? Just knowing when it's ready, or preparing the meat?
That's a really interesting question. And again, I've had years where I'm cooking 80 to 90 legs in a year. So my experience of cooking it is, a master of craft, a master of my craft. It's so second nature. There was a Sig Sauer event, and I was cooking with a buddy of mine, Bert Soren, and another buddy of mine, Bo Sandoval. And it was funny, they pulled me aside after, and they were like, dude, cooking next to you is entirely different than when I'm cooking at my house, because how fast you're working and how well you know the process and procedure and what you're doing. I felt like I was going slow and I was overcooking the meat. And they were watching you actually do it in your element while I'm doing it alongside of you. It's a whole different ball of wax, just in the sense of how fluid you are and engaged with the audience and the crowd and the immersive cooking experience.
What do you think brings everybody together on these events? Is it just the meat? Is it the whole experience that you provide?
Well, I think there's so much involved in it. And when you really get into it, you're looking at such an old experience on how we've ate meat for thousands of years. The flames, the fire, the hot and seared. Obviously, we didn't have the sauces and everything like that. But I think that it becomes fully immersive and captivating. And there's something with the human spirit and the human soul when you're looking at fire going, and how mesmerizing, sitting around a campfire can be. So you're taking how mesmerizing that is, and then you're adding a layer of food to it, and then you're adding extremely in-depth conversation. And, for me, a lot, getting to share our family tradition, or getting to share life experience of being sober for 20 years and what that's been like. Or, there's so many different layers and motivation, not only from me, but also sharing my experience and my strength and my hope and the journeys of life that I've been on throughout the entire process of life. There's so much involved in the experience that it becomes its own rite of passage. And that's also part of the reason why, for me, I'm so passionate about other people picking it up and learning how to do it, and then getting to share those same experiences, life experiences, with their family and friends, and provide, the same, the same experience.
So you mentioned what, Soren? Is that
Bert Soren,
Bert
yes.
Soren? He mentioned your name on Joe Rogan recently.
He did.
What was that like? Not only hearing your name, but have you gotten a lot of interest from that?
Have you ever done a deer leg like the flip flop style? Have you ever seen the
What do you mean?
Andy flip flop guy?
Best way to grill venison. All right, let me see what you got.
The Joe Rogan experience, which is something that I've paid attention to for a long time. I got introduced to it, obviously, years ago. And I think that how surreal it was. Bert Soren has become a good friend over the last 5 years. Since the first time that Bert and I shared a leg together over a fire, I believe it was with Total Archery Challenge, Park City, Utah. And Bert and I definitely got to share a bond over the last 5 years, and to see Bert and go into a 3.5 minute deep dive on the flip flop and my family's experience and what my grandparents created. Absolutely surreal. I mean, the amount of support that happened from that, not only through, business sales, but people phone calling me, friends, family, and people that I cook for privately all over the United States. Absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. I mean, the quote Joe Rogan effect is a real thing.
That's got to be pretty amazing to
Yeah.
get recognized on a platform that not only everybody listens to, but you totally respect from your friend.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't imagine.
Well, one of the other things that came from that is how transformational the flip-flop experience is, not just for myself, but I know that Bert does it for his family and friends. And the people that Bert has introduced it to do it for their family and friends. And it's created its own family tradition through, hundreds of people throughout America that respect big game and conservation and spend time in the woods and really have a love and appreciation for nature and the hunting experiences that we're afforded to have in North America.
What inspired the original and spicy versions of the flagship sauce? Was that something that your family passed down? Or?
Well, so I love spicy food. I absolutely love spicy food. So the original sauce, our flagship sauce, was created. So originally I would mix it in a 5-gallon bucket in my garage and ladle it into bottles, quart jars, and I would sell it in the honor system out of my, people would come into my backyard, there'd be a box and they'd grab a quart and they'd put a $20 bill in the envelope there and go about their day. And, that was the extent of it. For me, when I built the sauce, it was about, you can't necessarily put like fresh ingredients into the packaging because you are high potential risk for creating botulism and killing people. Not a good look for anybody in business trying to do any of that stuff. So for me, it was really important to make sure that the sauce was correct and it was the family recipe. And it actually took 3.5 years to create the sauce in the right recipe to match our family recipe.
How do you source the ingredients? Because you just said that you can't put a lot of preservative in there.
I don't put any preservatives. I don't put any added sugar. I mean, I source it the same way anybody would be buying seasonings and spices. So there's not really a whole lot of, crazy structure there as far as that goes. Finding the best ingredients that I can, obviously. And in that, the importance of the sauce for me is so paramount, and I have so much passion and love for how each individual bottle of sauce is done that still to this day, every single bottle of sauce that goes out our door is hand filled one at a time. So, we do a run of 1,000 bottles of sauce. Every single bottle of sauce is filled one by one with the seasonings and everything by hand. It's not vat mixed. It's not done in a machine, and that to me is very important to make sure that everything is correct when it goes out the door.
So I'm a big fan of your barbecue sauce and your hot sauces.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to admit, there's some crazy, crazy stuff going on that the first time I was like, pina colada barbecue sauce.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell would this be? But then I tried it and I was like, how did somebody figure out this would go together? Like, how do you sit around and think this would go good with a barbecue sauce? This would go good for a hot sauce? Or is it just trial and error where you're just trying a bunch of different stuff?
Yeah. So with all those sauces, that was all about flavor profiling. For example, pina colada, right? Not everybody loves coconut. So you're going to close yourself off from a whole lot of market. I love pina coladas, the drink. I drink virgin pina coladas. Something that I found that I loved is the flavor of barbecue with the pina colada mix up. And the way that I paired that would be, doing an elk burger with a seared pineapple on it, and some other odds and ends, and then throwing in that pina colada barbecue sauce. And to me, when I ate those burgers, it was just perfect. It was everything I wanted, depending on the day and where I was at and how I was feeling. I mean, obviously you can do a sriracha burger or a Western burger or whatever. For that particular style, it was like the pina colada was perfect.
Yeah, it's something unique, but amazing at the same time. And we have a lot of the different flavors at the house,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm always like fascinated by Miami Heat.
Mm-hmm.
What is this one? And then citric. I can't remember the names right now, but there's a lot of different
Citrus Crush.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so with the hot sauces, I mean, what is there, 3 ingredients in a typical hot sauce, like a good one? Then how do you decide on that one then? Because you spoke about the barbecue.
Yeah.
But what about the flavored hot sauces?
So for the hot sauces, again, it was all about a lot of it for me. I do a lot of visualization, and a lot of it while I'm tasting the flavors and adjusting and figuring out how I want those flavors to go. The Citrus Crush, for example, or the Miami Heat, for example. The Miami Heat kind of just gave me a very I'm going to do a taco, shrimp taco, cilantro, and then I'm going to put the flavor on it and I'm going to eat it. And what do I feel when I'm eating this? You know what I mean? And for me, a lot of the Miami Heat was it felt, and and I'll be honest, I've never been to Miami, but it was in my head, I was eating that taco like Miami Vice, just feeling that vibe and that energy from the flavor explosion and the amount of heat that is behind the sauce.
You're like a winemaker of condiments,
of food, of food sauces and seasonings.
Yeah, that's crazy because you would think, it's just hot sauce.
Yeah.
Then you get deep into it, and there's a whole world. Just like I'm sober myself, but when I used to drink wine, I would what's this bottle?
Mm-hmm.
What's this bottle? And that's kind of what I'm getting from your products too. It's what would this be? And is that what you're shooting for? Obviously,
Yeah.
But
For myself. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that a lot, like I would get a lot of people that would message me and be like, I don't understand this sauce. Why? And I'd be like, I wouldn't know how to explain it other than like, that was just my vision when I ate it, and immersing myself into the food experience that I was creating for myself. And then some people loved it, some people didn't, and that's okay.
I haven't found one that I don't like, so I can't understand
Well, I appreciate
those
that.
people.
Yeah.
What's the wildest reaction that you've seen when someone's trying to flip flop or coming to one of your flip flop events?
I think my favorite reactions that I've seen, and this has happened year in and year out, is vegans and vegetarians will watch what I'm doing, and they'll be hardcore in it 20 plus years, and they'll watch the experience, they'll hear the stories, they'll see people, taking bites and sauce dripping down their face and raving about how delicious it is. And they will become captivated enough to the point where they're like, I have to try this. There's everything in my body is telling me that I need to try this just from watching and seeing the experience unfold for everybody that's involved. I have to be a part of what's going on. And that probably is one of the most rewarding things about it, but also one of the coolest things to see, because these are people that are dedicated to a lifestyle and a way of life, which is no meat products whatsoever, or no meat and dairy and everything else, that goes along with the vegan lifestyle. And they will break their celibacy from not eating meat just to try it, and they'll love the experience. I have yet. The only complaints that I've gotten while I cook is sometimes it's too rare for some people. But I mean, to me, that's just, caveman syndrome. That's part of it. It's supposed to be cooked and rare.
As you were saying that, that's what I was thinking. Like someone that's a vegan, they're looking at the fire, they're looking at everybody as a tribe.
Mm-hmm.
Because supposedly we're tribal people, right?
Yeah.
And it must. Do you think it just? What is it? Where it just speaks to like the inner. I mean,
It speaks to our inner being.
Yeah.
It speaks to our inner being in the sense of tribalism. And it really, I think it pulls out, and who's to say past lives, but I think that it pulls out that inner nature in our DNA of humanity at its rawest, most pure form, of how we were, in my opinion, how we were designed to be, how we were designed to eat, how we were designed to share our food experience and our plunder of the day, and fortunately enough for us, we don't have the sense of, if I don't eat today, I might not eat tomorrow. We don't have that insecurity anymore, because food is abundance. Half of it's trash, but there's so much abundance of food. But I think that it calls to our soul and ignites that fire that we've had as a species as far back as ever since man created fire.
That makes a lot of sense, because we all came from primitive life forms, whatever.
Yeah.
Some say monkeys, evolution, whatever, but we were all in tribes,
Mm-hmm.
looking for someone, and in this case it would be you, that is the provider of the food,
The hunters of the communities. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's very primal.
How did your collaboration with Montana Block Company come about?
The collaboration with Montana Block Co. Absolutely amazing people. I love those guys to death. I wanted to work with them not only because they're a Montana-based company, but the guy who runs it is absolutely a great human being. I was introduced to him by Josh Smith and Brandon from Montana Knife Company, and I really wanted to support their business. And I spent a lot of time with a lot of different wood shops and had contacted and worked through different things with wood shops as far as the flip-flop mop is concerned. And I just felt at home. I went down to their shop. I met his whole team and everybody that he has working for him, and, kind of, on-site interview, a little bit with who he is, how he is, what does he do, what does he love, what's he passionate about, and life and everything like that. And I loved everything that he had to say. He was very personable, and just stellar communication, all about getting the job done and getting it done correct. And I loved that. And so that was who I chose to partner with for that particular product.
What makes I'm very ignorant to this. What makes a good mop, and what is exactly the mop?
So the flip-flop mop is a device that my father and I created over 4.5 years. And my father's a master craftsman. He built houses for the better part of 40 years. I think 42 if I'm being spot on with the number. He always ran a wood lathe and messed around with wood and in his shop, making bowls and all different kinds of, things. And, I went to him, and the problem that I was facing was traveling all over the United States, and I would wrap, I'd be like, all right, I'm cooking 6 different legs on this endeavor that I'm taking around the United States. So I would honestly go to our family rosemary bush and cut sprigs of rosemary, 14-inch sprigs of rosemary off, wrap them, and then I would put a soaked paper towel, and then I'd wrap them in saran wrap, each bundle, to try to keep them alive as long as I could. And rosemary is a pretty hardy plant. But you get into parts of the country where rosemary is not found, and it's not readily available to have a 14-inch sprig cut off of someone's plant. So my father and I really wanted to come up with something that anybody in America, no matter what rosemary length they get, they have the ability to make a mop. And almost every local grocery store in America sells fresh sprigs of rosemary. So we created a mop that you can put the sprigs into and use that to baste your sauce on, instead of having to have a rosemary plant. And again, in a lot of parts of the country where they don't really survive.
Got it on that. That's it's so simple but complex at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. So you said that you're sober just a little bit ago.
Yeah.
How did your struggles with drugs and alcohol shape your path to where you are now? And what was the turning point that led you to sobriety and reconnecting with the outdoors and the flip-flop method?
That's a really good question. So my first time I attempted sobriety, I was 15 years old. Went back to high school. My original high school almost wasn't going to let me back in due to the, drug and drinking culture of the school at the time. They let me back in. I made it about 3 years, and decided that it was a good idea to smoke pot, which quickly turned down a dark path for me for a while, for about 1.5 years. A lot of drinking, a lot of cocaine, a lot of, I don't want to say things that every 18-year-old does, but where I lived, a lot of us did. After 1.5 years of going back out there and thinking that I was able to control the beast of alcoholism and addiction, I found out that I was not, and pretty much wound up homeless, living in my car. My girlfriend had kicked me out. I eventually ended up totaling my car in a drunk driving accident. And at that point, that was when I kind of decided, like, this isn't going to work for me. I'm either going to die or I'm going to end up in prison. And I made a decision that day that I'm no longer going to do this, and went down the path of sobriety and everything that was recommended for me in order to achieve permanent sobriety. You know, in one of the books that I reference for sobriety and helped me get sober, you know, it talks about we recovered alcoholics. It doesn't really say recovering or trying to recover. It says recovered through the outline of this program. And that's what worked for me. I mean, different things work for different people. In my opinion, you know, AA 100%, and I'll blow my anonymity here. But that program was designed almost 100 years ago, 90 years ago, I want to say, or close to 90 years ago, between two alcoholics talking to each other. And it's the biggest sobriety movement on the planet. And there's offshoots, and other people have other versions of whatever they think works. And I also don't think that anyone is going to achieve sobriety unless they're at a point in their life where they're really ready to do it. I was at a point in my life where my sponsor told me to jump, and I said, how high? And there was no other house on the block. That was the last stop for me. And I think through sobriety, I found that I can achieve anything that I put my mind to, no matter what. There's always going to be hiccups. There's always going to be roadblocks. And I learned that if I get knocked down, I can get back up again, and failure is okay. And I can say that I've failed a lot more times in my life than I've ever succeeded. But I also know that there's no failure that's big enough that I've hit or experienced yet. And I've experienced death of family members, loss of serious relationships. My father died twice from heart attack, and he's still alive, came back, obviously. But I experienced the loss of my father's life, or potential loss of my father's life. I've experienced chaos in the sense of falling from a forklift 35 feet, 30 plus feet, and breaking my knee and my back, and, lacerating, bursting my liver, and having roofing material land on top of me, and coming out of that without a drug problem on the other end, and being very present in the sense of, like, I'm not trying to take prescription drugs, and coming through that. So ultimately, through sobriety, I found that anything is possible, whatever I put my mind, my heart, and my soul into. And there's the sky is the limit, and as long as I'm willing to accept that energy and believe that energy within myself, everything is going to be okay, no matter what.
That's really powerful.
Thanks.
It really is. Yeah, if you can beat alcohol, you can probably beat anything. Because our culture, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
You go to a restaurant, you go to a bar.
I cook events. I cook private events all over the United States. There's not an event that I've cooked that's a sober event, outside of cooking my own backyard barbecues that were sobriety birthdays.
Do you feel like being sober around alcoholics, and we're not going to bash people that have their own choices to make, but do you feel like being sober around a room full of drunk people is kind of like a superpower?
It's definitely interesting in my experience, having been sober for 20 years and in a very alcohol heavy industry. It's been extremely interesting to go into a room where people know that I'm sober. The reactions that I get from people knowing that I'm sober are kind of across the board. I get a lot of people that are very proud and love what I've been through. I get a lot of people that are very standoffish and hesitant to be around me because they can't share their drinking experiences with me. I feel like some people put up a roadblock within themselves, and it has nothing to do with me. It's a direct reflection upon themselves and how they feel about their own drinking and, whatever else they may partake in. And that has nothing to do with me. Absolutely nothing to do with me. That's their own stuff. It gets funny for me because I'm an open book, and I am so down to sit down with somebody and deep dive into drug problems and alcohol problems and the effects of life, where I think some people get scared or shy away from that because they're afraid to have those conversations in the sense that they might recognize something in themselves that they're not at a point in their life where they're ready to admit to themselves and do something to correct the behavior.
Yeah, it's real hard to make that assessment of yourself going, everybody tells me I might have a problem, but no. And then when you finally admit that, you can't believe that you've been lying to yourself for that long, right?
100%.
If you could flip flop for anybody, living or dead, who would it be?
Dream list of people to
Top 5.
cook deer legs for. Definitely cooking for the White House would be one. I would love to cook for the current administration. That would be an amazing experience. Obviously, I'd love to cook a deer leg and teach Joe Rogan how to cook a deer leg, just in the sense of him getting to be able to pass it and do it for all of his band of merry men that he surrounds himself with. That would be absolutely amazing. Adam Sandler, huge personality that I would love to cook a deer leg for and get to share the experience in life with him for 2 hours over fire and meat and just talk, smoke cigars. Who else? I would absolutely love to cook for, there's people that I've gotten to cook for that would be on my dream list of people to cook for.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot, man. I can't think of more than that right now.
Yeah.
But like, there's definitely people out there that are like bucket list of like, I would love to cook for that person, but it hasn't happened yet. And that's how I look at it. A lot of it for me is I just haven't cooked for them yet.
What I'm getting from talking to you about all of this is like you were into drugs and alcohol at one point in your life, and that's how you communicated to people, and that's how you had a sense of community, which you and I both know the people that you do drugs and alcohol with are not really your friends. But it seems like you've taken that and applied it to the flip flop events where you can connect with people on that level, on a deep level. Would you agree with that? Like you're taking, like when you're out with your friends and you were drinking, you had the sense of camaraderie and everybody was getting along and you were like, hey guys, check this out, let's do this. And then now with these events, it's almost like you're doing it in a sober manner. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that. So the way that I would take that would be I've taken the passion that I had and believe me, when I was doing drugs and drinking, like I was very passionate about that lifestyle. And I've taken that passion that I had there and I've refocused it into positive energy and positive experiences outside of drugs and alcohol, which happens to be cooking great food and sharing life's experiences in the roller coaster of life with everybody around me. So definitely I've reformed and reshaped the passion for life that I had around drinking drugs and alcohol, and repurposed it into this passion for life that I have in cooking and bringing amazing food experiences to people all around the world.
You've cooked or flip flopped for a lot of amazing people and a lot of amazing events. What is like the craziest one you've ever done? Because I know that I don't know if we can say Don Jr. I know you
Yeah.
done one for him. Um,
I did 4 for him in 5 days.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's start
We
there.
cook-
What's that like?
We cooked.
Because he seems like a
Yeah.
really personable guy, but
He's a great,
a wild card.
absolutely amazing character. So the way that happened was the founder of Field Ethos via West Coast Archery Shop out of Petaluma, California, had found out about the flip flop. And he asked me if I wanted to come and do a shooting demonstration with him and Don and spend some time in New York with a few folks and have a great time. Absolutely, 100%. I am not turning that down. I think it was the first May of COVID, and flew into Atlanta, and we drove from Atlanta all the way up to New York State and spent time out there. I believe there's 35 of us. I think I cooked a leg every night that we were there. And Don, everybody loved it. I met people that were there that are still very dear friends, very close to me. The first day showing up, it was me, Don, Jason, and 2 other guys. And both those 2 other guys are still very dear friends to me to this day. And me, Don, and these 2 other guys were sitting down. I can't remember what Jason was doing. And they were just asking me genuine questions about who I am, what do I come from, where am I? And we had a very in-depth 2.5, 3-hour conversation. And in that conversation, at the end of it, Don looks over at me and he's like, man, you've come a long way, and you're a true point of inspiration. And, your story is pretty fascinating. Everybody loves an American success story. And now to hear, obviously for me coming from, being homeless when I was 19 years old, to here I am 15 years later cooking for the current president's son, and to have him share that with me was a pretty amazing experience, in the sense that a lot of people respect the story. A lot of people understand where I come from and what I've been through. But he genuinely feels that way about, where I'm coming from. And it turned this American icon into a normal person and a caring human being. And I can't say enough great things about their entire family. In my experience that I've had with, the few members of the family I've been around, every single one of them is absolutely genuine and authentic, and a very great, caring person about the wellness for everybody that they're surrounded with. And you don't get that a lot, especially, from such a high level achieving group of people. Eric is an amazing person. He's always been overly kind. I don't want to say overly kind, but he's always been extremely kind to me every time that I've seen him and been around him. Always goes out of his way to be very nice and, hi, how you doing? What's going on? During the last campaign, I got to spend 5 minutes with their dad, and another experience of a kind, funny, charismatic human being, which I'm meeting the current person that's running for the president of the United States. And it was laughter and jokes and silliness and fun. And that's not what you would expect in that situation, but that's exactly what it was. And, you know, from the people that I've met throughout my years that have also encountered their family, everybody collectively, outside of, you know, anybody in political standing or news media, just your normal average everyday people, every single person that I've talked to that has, you know, worked with or met or been around their family has all said that they're some of the kindest, nicest people they've ever met in their life.
So you said there was what? How many people at that event?
35.
So 35. Just for people getting a gauge, like what's the smallest you've done for a flip flop event? Obviously, probably with your friends, you've done like one or two or something. But like, what's the scale from 35 to
The most
100?
people I've ever
Yeah,
fed.
yeah.
I mean, I would say that some of the smallest event, which mind blowing, Volquarts and Firearms, cooked with them a few times. And I think we're feeding 15 people or something like that. And we ran through 40 pounds of meat for 15 people. Primarily, you know, an average event is roughly 35 people for just one leg. And the biggest event that I ever cooked for was Sig Sauer. And I believe they were hosting a 2-day event with ballpark 5,000 people coming through. And I cooked 12 legs in 2 days.
Do you? So they give you like like obviously they give you like a projected attendance. How do you source the meat for that? Is that something that you reach out to hunters in Montana and say, "Hey, I need this," or how do you get the meat? Not
I'm
only do you get the meat, but how do you keep it preserved until you're using it?
frozen.
Frozen? Okay.
Yeah. So most of the meat I keep frozen. It all just depends on the event, the scale of the event, who I'm cooking for. A lot of private parties that I do, they're usually providing their own meat on animals that they've gone out and killed across wherever. If I'm doing public events, I'm using USDA approved meat, which is sourced through a company called Maui Nui Venison. And they're a phenomenal company. They are, in my opinion, they're the only USDA approved legitimate wild game sold in America. And I'm not trying to order legs from, you know, wherever it may be in New Zealand, where it's, you know, farm raised red stag or farm raised fallow deer or farm raised access deer. Um, Wild is a huge proponent for me. Like I really try to emphasize on that. So if I'm doing a big event, um, depending on their workload, I can order legs direct from them and use that.
Is there a big difference in taste, or is it just a personal preference on the wild versus
Farm.
farm?
There's a few different aspects there. Yes, I definitely think that there's a difference in taste of the meat. I also really into, sorry. Um, there's a few different things that are structured in that. Um, Wild game to me, not only is it better tasting meat, healthier and nutritious for each person that's eating it, I also think that eating wild game just hits different. It's, you know, it's a different food experience than, oh, here's a beef leg, you know, or oh, here's a, you know, pig leg. I wouldn't recommend anybody doing a flip flop with a pig leg. You know, but to me, when you're cooking wild game, you're cooking something that lived free. It lived wild. It was killed ethically. The meat was procured ethically. Um, and I'm just not into, I will never call farm raised meat wild game. I'll never say that that's a wild animal. That is a domestic animal that lives in a pen and is taken care of its whole life. So the biggest difference between farm raised animals and wild game is that wild game is 100% free range, lived its whole life doing exactly what that wild animal is supposed to do. And a farm raised animal was raised in a pen and ate out of a field and wasn't wild. It was domestic.
Is there a difference in taste in the different legs?
I think so. Across species, every animal tastes different. Elk tastes different from caribou, tastes different from moose, tastes different from sheep, tastes different from mule deer, which mule deer tastes different from white-tailed deer, which tastes different from black-tailed deer. When you cook a flip-flop, the amount of difference between each species that you can actually taste is minimal.
Okay.
It's absolutely delicious meat, and that's the best way to sum it up.
Is it? I've never had it, obviously, but is it tough? Is it, because you say it's seared? Is it just one of those things where the knife goes right through the meat?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the knife slides right through the meat, and it shaves off the most perfect medallion you've ever seen in your life. Almost every single cut, and every single cut is as delicious or more delicious than the last. And I'm a firm believer in every time that you flip flop and you take another 1/4 inch off and you get further into the meat tastes better the deeper into the leg you get.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
So the outer is good, but as you get into it and
It gets really good.
so it's more like is it more like a filet mignon type of
I don't know. I honestly couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
I couldn't compare it to any sort of beef restaurant cut steak that you get.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the best way you could compare it would be like if you're at a Brazilian steakhouse
Mm-hmm.
and they're bringing you out that fresh sliced seared cut where it's seared on one side and rare on the inside, on like a New York or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That would be how I'd compare it.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense from what you're describing and go to one of those establishments. How can people get a hold of you?
People can find me on Instagram. It's the Flip Flop Guy. Our website is www.theflipflopguy.com. Those would be the 2 best points of contact. Yeah.
How do they get like the mop and your sauces? Is that on the website?
It's all on the website, www.theflipflopguy.com. You can go into our shop. You can shop all our sauces. You can shop our seasonings, as well as I make heavy duty leather aprons because you're cooking over 1100 degree heat. It's nice to have that 1/4 inch thick protection. And as well as the flip flop mop is available there too.
It's been really informative and I'm glad we got to do this. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.